Welcome to the very first episode of Terrible Woodworking, where I make woodworking projects where I don't really know what I'm doing and they come out kind of okay but not fantastic. Today I'm making a sort of an open pantry shelving and counter thing to go in this spot in our kitchen below a window. The original vision for this was to have all mortise and tenon joinery and use it as an opportunity to get really good at doing that, but it did not go well in my tests. I don't really have the patience or the tools or the abilities, but I tried, and I decided to go with just dowel joinery. It went kind of alright at first. Just making these end pieces was kind of easy. All I had to really do was measure properly and cut properly, so I was feeling confident. I made 3 of those, just cut out all the pieces, and then it was time to do some of the dowel joinery. First I mark where I want the dowels to go on both pieces. Then I make kind of a knife mark there just so it's a little more accurate. And then I take the square and make a line across the whole board. And that's how I'm going to know where to put this dowel cutting jig here that I got at Harbor Freight for like 20 bucks. I tried to do it without this jig, but it just was a mess. So I ended up just running out and getting this jig. It's pretty easy to use. It's pretty self-explanatory. You just line it up on the line and pound in the dowel. And that's my first joint, my first dowel joint. It's not perfect, but it looks alright. It'll do the job. So I did that with all the pieces, dry fit it together. It dry fit together pretty well, and I was feeling very encouraged at this point. The dowels were definitely a lot easier than trying to cut some sort of joinery into, there's a lot of joints on this piece, and it would have been kind of ridiculous to cut mortise and tenons, even if I was really good and really knew what I was doing. So then I ripped a bunch more of these sort of long skinny pieces for the frame. This was a while ago. This was a really janky setup for the table saw. This was right after I got the table saw. Trying to catch the sawdust in that bag. I have a shop vac now that I stick in there, and I do not put the table saw on that folding table anymore. That is really sketchy. I wouldn't recommend doing that to anyone. I just put it on the floor now. I just use it right on the floor. It's fine. The whole dry fitting together on this first half of it was all right. It went pretty well. It was kind of fun. It was my first time doing something like this, and I was feeling pretty good. This top piece took a long time to line up. That was like, man, but I finally got it lined up and got this first half of it all dry fit together. So then I got to do basically that whole same thing again. So I ripped a bunch more boards, and it's pretty tedious. The whole time I was thinking, man, if I was trying to do mortise and tenons on all these, I'd be there for the next 10 years. And then my first little screw up is I kind of ran out of long pieces of wood. I had one more of these stretchers to install, and I was short one long piece, so I decided, well, I could go out and buy more wood, or I could stick these 2 offcuts together with some dowels and call it a day, and that's what I did. And it fit together okay, but it wasn't a great match. It looked a little bad. But I figured, hey, I'll just put it in the back. No one will ever see it. That's what I figured I would do, at least. We'll see if that actually materialized. You'll have to watch till the end. So then, yeah, it's quite a frustrating process to dry fit something like this together, but I finally got it, and I was feeling pretty good about it. I had every piece marked out just so I would know like exactly what joint goes into what. And at that point, it was time for the glue up, so I started with these end and middle pieces, and then I put the stretchers in, sort of one by one here. And then ratchet strap the whole thing together and put some weight on top of it. I didn't film the rest of the glue up because it was an absolute nightmare, but here's the aftermath of it. I've got it all ratchet strapped with a weight on top in my garage. This was a mess. I fit it together all wrong. Somehow my labeling system fell apart on me. I was scrambling, I was sweating, it was a stressful mess. I had this dowel sticking out here. I don't know what happened. I honestly, everything just seemed to go out the window, but I managed to sort of brute force it all together, and here it is after the glue cured up, and it felt pretty sturdy. And because I ended up fitting so many of the wrong joints together, I had all these gaps, and I just went in with some 5-minute epoxy and filled in all those gaps. You know, it looked fine. Trying to do this as cheap as possible, so I figured I would just use some MDF for the shelves. So I cut that MDF to length and width, and then I wanted to really notch it in and make it all come flush around all the edges. So I cut out these corners, and then that fit nicely in. I got a lot of veneer off of a Craigslist deal. I paid like $50 and got this massive box of veneer. So I used some curly maple veneer. This was my first time working with veneer, so I was a little nervous, but it actually was pretty simple process. I was using contact cement, so I just paint on the contact cement, let it sit for 10 minutes. Then I use these sticks to kind of, slowly put it on, and then I rub it down with this. I rounded out a corner of a piece of wood with sandpaper, just push really hard all over it. These didn't fit perfectly, so I had to sort of scribe them and cut them, and then they fit right together. I just repeated that veneering process with all the other shelves. But then when I got to the top shelf, I ran into a problem where no matter how I turned it or no matter how I tried to do it, that shelf just wouldn't fit inside the frame. I thought about it for a while, and I decided I just had to cut it in half. I have to put the veneer on it after it's installed on the frame. And theoretically, once the veneer's on there, you won't even be able to tell. So I put on the contact cement. I was pretty nervous to do this because I really didn't want to screw it up. And it actually kind of went off without a hitch. It went off really well. The veneer was tough to work with, though. It was all very old veneer. You can see in this shot there's some chipping on the corner. I kept chipping it, and it was pretty hard to get flat, but it was very satisfying to kind of take this kind of crappy looking MDF and turn it into this curly maple. I really enjoyed that. I think I like working with veneer. I never thought I would, but I didn't want to see the edge of the MDF, so I cut these long strips of the veneer to stick onto the sides, and this did not go very well. And in the finished product, this is one of the things that looks the worst. I'm not sure how I would do it now. I haven't really thought of a better way to do it, but I'm sure people that are more familiar with using veneer would have some techniques. And then with that, it was time to put this big slab on the top. I just had this big slab of oak. I think it's red oak. I wanted white oak, but they didn't have it at the hardwood store. I had to cut it to length, and I wound up with this big chunk of extra wood, and I ended up making these shelves for my closet, so that was nice. And then because I watched too much Blacktail Studios videos, I decided to use these threaded inserts to mount the tabletop, but I didn't realize he actually knows what he's doing, and I don't, so I could not get these to go in straight. It was just a mess. Yeah, what a mess. I mean, obviously you're supposed to use a jig when you drill the holes in, but I don't know what my deal was. I ended up just doing dowels, and that was better for this particular project because this thing is, I try to measure it well. I try to make it square, but this thing is kind of all out of whack. It looks all right to the eye, but if you were to go in there with a measuring tape and a square, they're in a level. I mean, it's not perfect. It's pretty far from perfect, but that's okay for my purposes. I finally got that thing to fit on decently. I didn't film the sanding of the base, but I spent quite a long time sanding that, and then I'm sanding the top with my belt sander, and then from there I just hand sanded up through the grits up to just 220. I didn't go past 220. Then I used the router with a round over bit and kind of went around the whole edge of the tabletop. And here it is under the window. It's a little tall. I ended up taking about a 1/2 inch off the legs after this, but so that it's level with the windowsill. Now here's the fun to watch part. I put Danish oil over the whole thing. I just coated Danish oil on everything. I really like that stuff. It's relatively inexpensive, and I always get good results from it. And on the top of the table I used polyurethane. On the tops of the shelves I used polyurethane, and over the frame I used a couple coats of shellac. Any surface that is gonna have things sitting on it, I use the polyurethane for, because that's gonna hold up a bit better than shellac. And now we fast forward about 6 months after I finished this thing. It's been sitting in our kitchen for over half a year. We've been using it to store stuff. I didn't dress it up in any way for this. It's just its kind of usual messy self. It's decorated for Christmas right now. And I mean, I'm happy with it. I think everyone's happy with it. The red oak look, you know, it maybe wouldn't be my first choice in the future. I think red oak, especially in kitchens these days, is considered a bit tacky. I did want white oak, but you know how it is. It's a little more expensive. All in all, this cost me a little over $200 to build, and that's including like consumables like sandpaper and stuff. So it's not too bad. It has a lot of cosmetic issues. I completely screwed up the glue up, and this split piece that I was talking about earlier ended up in the front instead of the back. Whoops. The veneer's already coming up in a few spots because I didn't really know what I was doing when I put it down. I'll have to just stick some CA glue in there. But all in all, I'm really glad I built it. It's always preferable to me to try to build something, even if it doesn't come out perfect. I think it's always better than some flat pack IKEA crap. I encourage anyone to just make their own stuff, even if it's a little sloppy. You don't have to go for perfection. It's nice to have things in your house that have a little character, especially nowadays when everything's so mass-produced. But anyway, that's enough of my soapbox. Don't worry if you're a banjo viewer that only wants to see banjo videos. I got a lot more banjo videos coming. This is just a little side thing. So anyway, thanks for watching.